Hello and welcome to Scholarph. This is our UTME prep series, and in this recording we're taking Biology 2018. The major topics that are featured in this year are questions on classification of living organisms, cell and its environment, adaptation, homeostasis, sense organs. We have ecology, genetics and variation, evolution, and the body systems, the circulatory system, support system, respiratory system. If you're new to this channel, endeavor to subscribe so you can keep receiving awesome content and support the channel. Also, like and share our videos. All right, let's get started. First question is on classification of living organisms. A group of closely related organisms that are capable of interbreeding to produce fertile offspring are known as members of A. We have kingdom, B. class, C. family, and D. species. All right, so the species is a group of closely related organisms that are able to interbreeding to produce offsprings. That's option D. Next is a question on cell and its environment. It also relates to nutrition. A beaker of pond water containing a few specimens of Euglena was placed in a dark room for 2 weeks. At the end of this period, the specimens of Euglena were still alive because they were A. able to carry out holozoic nutrition, B. able to carry out photosynthesis using carbon dioxide in the pond water, C. better adapted to life in darkness than to life in light, and D. not overcrowded. Alright, so the Euglena has plant and animal-like feature. Alright, it is able to photosynthesize due to the possession of chlorophyll. Also, it is also able to feed directly on like ready-made food. Alright, and so even though the Euglena was placed in a dark room where photosynthesis there is inhibited due to the darkness, photosynthesis requires light. Alright, now even though it is in a dark room where it cannot really photosynthesize, it can still feed by holozoic means, and that makes A the correct option. Alright, next is a question on living organism and cell and its environment. The cytoplasm of the cell is considered a very important component because it A. regulates the amount of energy in the cell, B. suspends all cell organelles, C. is the outermost part of the cell, and D. is solely responsible for cell division. Alright, A relates more to the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. C. the outermost part of the cell is the cell wall in plants or the cell membrane in animals. While D, as for the cellular division, this is more related with the nucleus itself. B here is the correct option, that the cytoplasm suspends all the cell organelles, and it encompasses everything in the cell besides the nucleus. So the cell itself is divided into two, the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Next is a question on cell and its environment. So you have a diagram here where you have a tissue funnel, a clamp. This is distilled water in this beaker. You have sugar solution, and then you have a membrane tied over the funnel, the tissue funnel. So after an hour, the level of water in this tissue funnel will A. rise, B. fall, C. remain the same, and D. double. Alright, so what we have here is an experiment, alright, which is related to the next question. Now here, this sugar solution is a stronger solution. It is stronger than this distilled water. All right, this distilled water is of lower concentration. So you are going to have molecules of water, molecules of like this molecules of this distilled water moving through this semi-permeable membrane here, which is this membrane. It is semi-permeable membrane. That is, it allows for some substances to pass. All right, so you're going to have this water, molecules of water moving from a region of lower concentration, which is the distilled water, to a region of higher concentration or stronger concentration, which is the sugar solution. So the level of water in this tissue funnel would rise. That is option A. All right, next the question on cell and its environment. The experiment is used to demonstrate the process of A. transportation, B. water culture, C. diffusion, and D. osmosis. Alright, this experiment is used to demonstrate the process of osmosis, where the water molecules, which are of lower concentration, are moving to a region of higher concentration, the sugar solution, through a semi-permeable membrane, which is this membrane here that is tied over the funnel. Next is a question on cell and its environment. In a plant cell, the role of the membrane is played by A. nucleolus, B. cell wall, C. cytoplasm, and D. mitochondria. All right, so the main membrane that we have in cells are the cell wall, the cell membrane, and the nuclear membrane. And B, of course, is the correct option. That is cell wall. Now, what they do is this membrane, they are selectively permeable, and that means that they allow some substances to pass, and they do not allow for some other substances to pass. So they selectively filter what goes into the cell and what goes out of the cell. Next, cell and its environment. Red blood cells are found to have burst open after being placed in distilled water for an hour. This phenomenon is known as A. Plasmolysis, B. Diffusion, C. Osmosis, and D. Wilting. Alright, so the correct option, of course, is C. Hemolysis is the splitting of red blood cell when it becomes overstretched. Next, on irritability, the curvature movement of plants in response to the stimulus of water is A. Hydrotropism, D. Geotropism, C. Phototropism, D. Thigmotropism. Alright, so tropism is basically response due to stimulus in plants, and if the stimulus is water, then that is hydrotropism. That's option A. If it is due to gravity, it is geotropism. If it is due to light, it is phototropism. And if it is due to touch, it is thigmotropism. Okay, so first question is on the paper type that you're given. So you have which chemistry paper type is given to you: type A, type B, type C, or type D. Okay, so this question is very essential as it determines how your exam will be marked. Okay, so you'll be given different types. It could be type A, B, C, D. Sometimes it could be colors like type red, type yellow, type green. You must endeavor to pick the type that corresponds to what you're given. Okay, so for this recording, we're using the type A. Now, picking the wrong type, okay, is going to affect how your exam will be marked. That means that your papers or your answers will be marked with answers that are meant for another type. And so that will really mar your results. Next is on movement and supporting system. The longest bone in the body is the A. Humerus, B. Femur, C. Scapula, and D. Tibia. The longest, largest, and strongest bone in the body is the thigh bone, which is the femur. The smallest are the stapes in the hair. Option B is the correct option here. Next is a question on movement and support system. Which of the following structures is not a skeletal material? A. Cartilage, B. Chitin, C. Bone, and D. Muscle. Alright, so the main skeletal material are the bones, the cartilage, and the cortical. The cortical is what contains the chitin. The muscle is not a skeletal material. It is a tissue that is connected to the bones, and it's connected to the bones through what we call the tendon. Alright, now it helps with movement. The pull action of the muscle on the bone is what brings about movement. Next is on circulatory system. The reason why the flow of blood through the capillaries is very slow is A. Because the walls of capillaries are very thin, B. To avoid high blood pressure, C. To ensure that the individual does not get dizzy, and D. To allow adequate time for exchange of materials. D here is the correct option. Alright, the flow of blood through the capillary is slowest, and that is to allow adequate time for the exchange of materials, that is gases and nutrients. Which of the following groups of organisms has kidney as their excretory organ? This is related to the excretory system. A. Fishes, amphibians, birds, man. B. Fishes, amphibians, annelids, insects. C. Fishes, reptiles, birds, tapeworm. And D. Fishes, protozoans, amphibians, man. Which has has kidney as their excretory organ. Insect is out. Alright, in the insect, what we have is what we call the Malpighian tubules. The tapeworm is out. Alright, the nephridium is its excretory organ, while the protozoans, they have the contractile vacuole as an osmoregulatory organelle. The correct option here is option A. The fishes, amphibians, birds, and man, they have kidney as an excretory organ. Next is a question on the circulatory system. Which of the following features is not characteristics of their arteries? So arteries: A. Possess valves at internals through their length. B. Have thick muscular and elastic wall. And C. Carries blood away from the heart. And D. Transports oxygenated blood with the exception of the pulmonary artery. Alright, so the arteries is the blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. Alright, so C is correct of it. It also have thick muscular and elastic wall, and this is because the blood that's coming from the heart is coming at a great pressure. Alright, so the elastic wall allows for the blood vessel to really expand when it needs to. Also, it transports oxygenated blood from the heart, except for the pulmonary arteries, which transport deoxygenated blood to the lungs for oxygenation. All right. So the correct option here is option A, that the artery does not have valves. Now, valves, they are one-way opening that allows blood to flow in just one direction. All right. These valves, you find them in the veins, which are the blood vessels that return blood back to the heart, and that is so that the blood that is being returned back to the heart does not backflow into the body system. So the veins they have valves, which are like one-way openings, while the arteries, they do not have valve. All right, this is a question on adaptation. The graph below shows the results of a laboratory investigation which measures the temperatures of a lizard and a bird under changing artificial condition. So you have to use this question to answer this question 15 and the next question 16. Which of the statement below is valid? You have A, the bird's blood was always warmer than that of the lizard. B, the body temperature of the bird varied less than that of the lizard during changes in environmental temperature. And C, the body temperature of the bird remained constant despite changes in environmental temperature. And D, the body temperature of the lizard was always close to that of the environmental temperature. Alright, option C here is the correct option. If you look at this graph, you can see that you have a straight line for the bird. That means that its body temperature remained constant, and this is because the bird is warm-blooded. Alright, so it keeps regulating its body to a constant temperature. However, the body temperature of the lizard keeps increasing with increase in environmental temperature, and that is because the lizard is poikilothermic, that is cold-blooded, and so its temperature is determined by the temperature, like the heat that is getting the external heat that is getting from the environment. So the greater that heat, the greater the body temperature of the lizard. Alright, next is a question on homeostasis. What physiological term can be used to describe the regulation of the body temperature of the lizard? A, homeostasis. B, homeothermy. C, poikilothermy. And D, osmoregulation. Alright, now homeostasis is the regulation of a constant internal environment. Alright, poikilothermy is the regulation of the internal temperature in the cold-blooded animals, like the lizard in this question. So C is the correct option. Alright, even though homeostasis is the regulation of a constant internal environment, poikilothermy is a more specific answer here. Alright, in relation to the cold-blooded animals, like the lizard in the question. Homeostasis. The reason why hospitals use saline solutions as drip instead of water is A, because salt is a preservative. B, to prevent contamination of the body. C, to maintain a composition of body fluids. And D, to increase the number of blood cells. Alright, the saline solution is a salt solution. It is a solution of sodium chloride, and it is used to replenish lost fluid. It is preferred to water as drip because it helps to maintain the composition of the body fluids. That's option C. Next is on sense organ. The part of the ear which contains nerve cells sensitive to sound vibrations is the A, cochlea, B, ampulla, C, tympanum, and D, malleus. The cochlea is the innermost part of the ear that contains hearing fluid and the auditory nerve, which contains neurotransmitters that help to transmit audio impulses to the brain for interpretation. A is the correct option. Next, to sense organs, the eye. Spectacles with convex lenses correct long-sightedness by A, converging the light rays before they enter the eye. B, diverging the light rays before they enter the eye. C, reducing light intensity before it enters the eyes. And D, increasing light intensity before it enters the eye. Alright, the convex lens is used to correct long-sightedness, while the concave lens is used to correct short-sightedness. The convex lens corrects long-sightedness by further increasing the convergence of the light ray before it reaches the eyes. That's A. Next is on growth and reproduction. A seed of a flowering plant can best be described as A, radicle and plumo. B, the developed ovule. C, the embryo and endosperm. And D, developed ovary. Alright, so after pollination in plants, the ovary is going to develop into a fruit, while the ovule, will develop into a seed. So the seed is a developed ovule. That's B. Next is a question on ecology. Which of the following processes removes carbon from the atmosphere? A. Putrefaction. B. Photosynthesis. C. Volcanic eruption. And D. Burning fuels. Alright, so photosynthesis is a food manufacturing process in plants. Now, this process requires two main raw material, and that is water and carbon dioxide. So, carbon dioxide is removed from the atmosphere in form of, carbon is removed from the atmosphere in form of carbon dioxide by photosynthesis. Option B. Next is a question on ecology as well. Which of the following cycles involves the process of precipitation and transpiration? A. Water cycles. B. Carbon cycle. C. Nitrogen cycle. D. Oxygen cycle. Alright, precipitation and transpiration, they are processes that produce water. Alright, and so they are related to the water cycle. The three main processes in water cycle is evaporation, precipitation, and condensation. Evaporation takes up water, precipitation and condensation returns water. Next is also a question on ecology. What is the critical limiting factor for plants that are below the photic zone in an aquatic ecosystem? A. Availability of nutrients. B. Availability of water. C. Intensity of light. And D. Carbon dioxide concentration. Alright, so the photic zone is a part of the ocean where the rate of photosynthesis is greater than that of evaporation. Alright, now lower, like below the photic zone, the light intensity is lower. Alright, and photosynthesis there is not really supported. So option C is the correct option. The intensity of light is a limiting factor for plants below the photic zone. Next on ecology as well. Which of the following instruments is used to estimate the number of plants in a habitat? A. Putter. B. Pitfall trap. C. Quadrant. And D. Sweep net. Alright, the quadrant is an ecological instrument that is used in studies. It is used to estimate the number of the species of a particular plant that is living in a particular habitat. So that's C. Next, which of the following statements is true about sandy soil? It A. Has limited airspace. B. Is light and easy to dig. C. Drains slowly. And D. Is heavy and poorly aerated. A is wrong. Alright, the sandy soil has large or many airspaces. C, it drains slowly. That is wrong. Alright, the sandy soil has the lowest water retaining capacity, and so it drains faster. And D, it is heavy and poorly aerated. That is wrong. It is the lightest. So B is the correct answer. It is light and it is easy to dig due to the presence of many air spaces in it. It is light because the particles are dry, or they are most dry. Next, which of the following organisms is a primary consumer? This is also related to ecology. We have A, dog. B, sheep. C, grass. And D, fungus. Alright, so in a grazing food chain, it starts with the producer, which are usually autotrophs, mainly plants, alright, green plants. Then you have the primary consumers. Those are the herbivores. They are those that feed directly on, on the grass or the primary food, like the producer. And so here, the herbivore that you have here is the sheep. Alright, it's a primary consumer because it feeds directly on the grass. The secondary consumer, they are carnivores or omnivores. Tertiary consumer, they are carnivores or omnivores. While these decomposers, they are your fungi, your algae that feed on the leftover. So B is the correct option here. Next, we have another question in ecology. Study the diagram of the food chain shown below and use it to answer this question and the next question, 27 and 28. So you have P, Q, R, S, T in this food chain. The organism designated as P is the food chain above is normally sustained by energy from A, sunlight, B, carbohydrates, C, green plants, and D, mineral salts. Alright, so the food chain usually starts with the producer, which are autotrophs. They are usually green plants that are able to manufacture their food. Then you have the primary consumer, which are usually herbivores that feed on this. Then you have the secondary consumer that feed on this, and then you have the tertiary consumer that feed on the secondary consumer. And then this T here will usually be the decomposer, those ones that feed on the leftover. All right. So the primary consumer, which is your P here, the producer, which is your P here, they are green plants, and green plants they photosynthesize using energy from the sunlight. That's option A. Also on ecology, which of the following statements best describes the organism that is designated as R? A, feeds on S. B, is a primary consumer. C, is a producer as well as a consumer. And D, is a secondary consumer. All right, so like I explained in the previous slide, so your P is your primary, is a producer, which are usually at autotrophs. Your Q is the primary consumer that feeds on this. Your R here is the secondary consumer. That is option D. All right, so R feeds on the primary consumer. So this, for example, can be a grasshopper, while this can be like a snake. All right, so the grasshopper feeds on the grass or the plant, like leaf, while the snake feeds on the grasshopper. And then this one can be your tertiary consumer, like let's say a hawk, for example, that feeds on the snake, and then this is your decomposer that feeds on like the leftovers of this or this. Next is a question relating to genetics and variation. Which of the following diseases is not hereditary? A, albinism, B, scabies, C, hemophilia, and D, color blindness. Alright, so hereditary diseases, they are diseases that can be transferred from one generation to another, like from parent to offspring. Scabies is a contagious skin infection that cannot be transferred from the parent to the offspring, to the baby or the child. So that's option B, scabies. Next is on growth and reproduction. The immediate product of meiosis in flowering plants is the A, sporophyte, B, gametophyte, C, zygote, and D, pollen grains. Alright, so meiosis in flowering plant produces the pollen grains. That's option D. Next, on living organisms, cell and its environment. DNA in eukaryotic cells is contained in the A, central vacuole, B, nucleus, C, lysosome, and D, Golgi body. Alright, so in a eukaryotic cell where you have a well-defined nucleus, the nucleus contains the genetic material. That's your DNA. That's option B. While in prokaryotic cell, like the cell in bacteria, the DNA is found in the nucleoid region, or it is unevenly distributed in the cytoplasm. Next is a question on genetics and variation. A man who is heterozygous for the disease hemophilia marries a woman who is double recessive for hemophilia. What percentage of their offspring would have the disease? A, 0%, B, 25%, C, 50%, and D, 75%. Alright, the disease hemophilia is a sex-linked character, and it is recessive and is only expressed where you have like homozygous pair of the defective gene. Alright, so from this union where you have a man who is heterozygous for the disease and a woman who is homozygous, meaning double recessive. Alright, that's what this double recessive implies, that the woman is homozygous for this defect. Alright, then the resulting children from that union, all the girls, they will be double recessive as well, and so they will have the disease. While the male, they will only be carriers. All right, and so from this union, the percentage of the offspring that will have the disease is 50%. That is all the female. While the male, the other 50% will be carriers. Next on growth, cytokinesis of mitosis is a process that ensures that A, each daughter cell gets the necessary organelle. B, there is distribution of a complete set of genes into each daughter cell. C, daughter cells inherit new genetic combinations. And D, worn-out organelles are excluded from daughter cells. So cytokinesis is the last part of mitosis, where the cell now splits into two separate cells, and it ensures that there is distribution of a complete set of genes into each of the daughter cells. So that's option B. Next on adaptation, an animal which is active during the day is known as A, nocturnal animal, B, diurnal animal, C, terrestrial animal, and D, homeothermic animal. Option A, nocturnal animals, they are animals that are active in the night, like the owl or the bat. B, they are diurnal animals, that are they are animals that are active in the day, and that of course is the correct option here. C, terrestrial animals, the animals that are found on land, whether it's in the forest or in the arid land, the desert. While D, homeothermic animals, the animals that are warm-blooded, like the birds. Next on evolution, evidence of evolution includes the following except A. Fossil records, B. Comparative anatomy, C. Mutation of genes, and D. Geographical distribution of organisms. Alright, the fossil record is one of the evidence of evolution. The fossil records, they are deposits of older organisms, and this is an evidence of their existence. B. Comparative anatomy is also an evidence of evolution, looking at the anatomy of the present, the living, the present day organism and the old. Also, D. Geographical distribution of organisms, that's ecology. Alright, it's also an evidence of evolution. Mutation of gene, option C, is not an evidence of evolution. Next is on reproduction. So use the diagram below to answer this question 26 and the next question 37. The diagram shows that the organisms are A. Hermaphrodite, B. Viviparous, C. Ovoviparous, and D. C. Oviparous, and D. Ovoviparous. Alright, as you can see in this diagram here, you have the eggs that are laid outside and fertilized outside. Alright, so external fertilization and growth of the egg is what you find in oviparous animal. That's option C. In viviparous animal, the egg is fertilized inside, alright, and then it is laid. So you have this, for example, in hens. While the last one, ovoviparous animals, the egg remains in the body of the female, while nourishment is produced through the embryo, through the yolk. Next on reproduction. The breeding posture illustrated in the diagram is known as A. Mating, B. Amplexus, C. Courtship display, and D. Reproductive swimming. Alright, amplexus is the breeding posture or the mating position in toads and frogs. So this is a question, that's option C, option B, of course. So this is a question about specifics, alright, and we've seen a question like that before. So even though this is a mating position, alright, but the mating position in toads and frog is regarded as amplexus. So it's more about being specific. So if you have a question like this where there's a general answer and there's a more specific answer, you should go for the more specific answer. So the mating position in frogs or toad is amplexus. That's option B. Next on genetics and variation, an accurate identification of a rapist can be carried out by conducting A. RNA analysis, B. DNA analysis, C. blood group test, and D. behavioral test. Option B is the correct option, DNA analysis. So a DNA analysis can be used to identify a rapist. So what happens is the resulting child from that rape incident, the DNA of that child can be compared with that of the rapist, with that of the rapist. All right. If the DNA result is positive, then the accused is in fact the rapist. Next is a microorganism. A boy who is fond of swimming in a pond finds himself passing urines with traces of blood. He is likely to have contracted A. Schistosomiasis, B. Onchocerciasis, C. Poliomyelitis, and D. Salmonellosis. Alright, passing of urine with traces of blood is a symptom of schistosomiasis. It's also called bilharzia, and it is caused by blood flux. Next is an adaptation, also relates to genetics and variation. The flippers of a whale and the fins of a fish are examples of A. Divergent evolution, B. Coevolution, C. Continuous variation, and D. Convergent evolution. Alright, so similar morphological features, alright, like the wings that you have in birds, insects, and bats, are examples of convergent evolution. And again, these features, they happen to have similar or related functionality, like they're used for virtually the same thing. Alright, so it's an evidence of convergent evolution. Alright, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you're new to the channel, please endeavor to subscribe and like and share our content. Also check out our playlist for crash courses on physics, chemistry, and biology. Those videos are tailored for examination candidates like you. You could use them to prepare for examinations like UTME. You can also use them for revision. You can also use them if you want to get a hold of a topic, like get an overview of a topic. All the best in your examination. Do not forget to practice free UTME at exams.scholaf.com, so you can use that to practice for your UTME exam and put yourself in the exam situation. Also, we have modular quizzes, so if you've read the topic in biology, physics, or chemistry, you can head on to exams.scholaf.com to take modular quizzes and just see how well you're doing with that topic. Thank you.